There comes a moment when a woman no longer reaches for his hand. No more good-night kisses, no more urge. The space between them stretches like time itself, and he thinks she must be gone. But what he doesn't know is that this silence is its transformation. It is not the sound of love leaving. It is the echo of a woman arriving within herself, arriving into something sacred, untouched, unshaken. When she stops touching, it is not because she no longer feels. It's because she has started to feel more than ever. She treats not out of coldness, but out of heat, internal, ancient, rising. Fish doesn't scream. It simmers quietly beneath the skin, whispering truths she can no longer ignore. In the absence of external intimacy, a more sacred intimacy begins. She touches her soul, not with fingers, but with reverence. She walks barefoot across memories bruised. She gathers the shards of herself she gave away to Isley. She is not absent. She is becoming. Carl Jung said, everything we repress returns as fate. What she once avoided in herself now calls to her, not with fear, but with invitation. When a woman stops seeking pleasure outside of herself, she does not become numb. She becomes lit from within. The absence of touch is not punishment. It is a portal, a return to instinct, to sovereignty, to truth. And the world, so addicted to constant movement, cannot understand this sacred stillness. It mistakes her quiet for collapse, her distance for disinterest. But there is power in her pause. There is fire in her silence. She is not she is distilling. He starts thinking. Why does her silence feel later than her words? Why does her distance burn more than her closeness ever did? Because the absence of touch removes the mask. It reveals what was never said, what was always felt, but drowned in distraction. Because he's never met this version of her before, the version who no longer asks to be beloved, but instead loves herself so completely that she has no space for wholehearted connection. She has stopped knocking on the doors of those who donder her. She stopped shrinking to be held. She no longer twists herself into forms others can understand. Abstinent sighs, not a lack of desire. It's a shift of energy, a transmutation, a fire to. She is not suppressing herself. She is redirecting, rebuilding, refining. When she stops touching, her soul starts sculpting. Sculpting boundaries, sculpting wisdom, sculpting freedom. Each day without his arms beckons another layer of armor removed, another mask burned, another truth unearthed. Society fears this woman beckons. She no longer begs for value. She no longer trades her body for attention. She no longer seduces from lack. She has remembered something older than romance, her own power, the kind of power that doesn't scream. It hums beneath the surface. It pulses in her veins like a song only Thassel can hear. The feminine, when engined from performance, is not soft. It is wild, not fragile, but holy. And when she touches herself now, it's not for escape. It's for reverence. She touches her own scars like they are sacred scripture. She runs her fingers along her fears, not to avoid them, but to understand them. This is initiation. He thought she was withdrawing from him, but truly she was returning to herself, and in that return she became attainable, not unreachable, but she is not the woman who's begged to be enough. She is the woman who now knows she always was. Days go by, he replays conversations, her softness, her absence, her stillness, and slowly it dawns on him that her silence was never rejection. It was It was the sound of her soul becoming too full for shallow spaces. She didn't walk away. She rose, and rising always feels like leaving tothos who remain asleep. Jung called its process of individuation, a woman shedding every identity she wore for others to finally wear the truth of her own soul, to stand naked in her essence, unapologetically whole, and in this silence, she begins to hear her own voice again. Not the voice that says, be good. Not the one that says, be sexy. But the one that whispers, be whole. The one that says you never needed permission. You only need a... She no longer needs to bickerson, because she is already and in doing so, she has become a woman who chooses deliberately, intuitively from overflow, not from... The man who watches her now feels the ache of what he not her body, but her becoming. He misses her. Not because she was his, but because he realizes he never truly saw her, not in her depth, not in her glory. You see, when the body goes quiet, the soul doesn't die. It draws not with noise, but with knowing, a knowing that cannot be shaken by a knowing that does not beg to be understood. It simply is. And in that saccade space between skin and soul, he realizes something painful and profound. He never truly saw her until she stopped, and by then she had already found something deeper than any touch heckled offer herself. This isn't about abstinence as denial. It's about abstinence as alchemy, the art of redirecting energy back to the womb of the soul so she can birth herself anew. She didn't retreat to punish. She retreated to remember. She pulled away not because he failed her, but because she was failing herself. Every time she tried to be more likable, more accomplished, more desirable, she slipped further from her own fire. So now she turns to that flame, not as a lover waiting, but as a priestess reclaiming. Her silence is not silence. It is It is the sound of shedding false identities. It is the echo of everything untrue collapsing, and what remains, a woman who cannot be reduced, not to a body, not to a role, not as a man's fantasy. Abstinence was never about avoiding sex. It was about avoiding self-betrayal. The kind that whispers, just give a little more of yourself. Maybe then they'll stay. She no longer plays that game. Because this time she's not shrinking to be chosen. She is expanding to choose. The world doesn't teach women how to hold their... It teaches them how to be pleasing, how to be palatable, how to trade truth for attention. So when a woman stops performing, the world calls her cold, detached, unreachable. But the truth is she is not unreachable. She is just no longer willing to reach beyond. He starts to feel it. The absence of her energy, not just her talk, but her presence. The way her laughter once filled the room. The way her intuition softened his anger. The way her stillness made him feel seen, now gone. And in that void, he begins to realize he didn't lose her. He ignorated until she found herself. The silence she inhabits now is not punishment. It is poetry, a language only the soul understands. She is not isolating. She's incubating. Do you see? She no longer walks toward temporary warmth. She waits for the sun that rises from within. And if that takes weeks, months, years, so be it. Because she finally understandliness is not the absence of another. It is the absence of self. And no, she is present with herself, more than ever. She eats in silence. She breathes with intention. She watches her thoughts like clouds. No judgment, no shimmy, just awareness. She sees how much once gave, just to be held. She sees how many times she said yes, when her body screamed no. How many times she smiled to keep the peace, when war raged inside her chest. Never again. This silence is not the silence of repression. It is the silence of restoration, of reclamation, of resurrection. He thought she was waiting for him to call, to explain, to chase, but she was never waiting. She was waking up. And now, even if he calls, she may not answer. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. The woman she is now doesn't settle for apologies. She looks for alignment. She doesn't melt it. She listens for presence. And if that presence is absent, she walks in. Jung would call this the integration of the shadow. When the part of her that and stayed silent finally begins to speak. The part that was once hidden behind rolls and smiles, and seduction walks to the front of her life. She's no longer the good girl. She is no longer the muse. She is no longer Theon who waits. She is the one who walks away without noise but with and that terrifies him barks. A woman who has found her soldos, not fear solitude. She fear selling herself short again, so she doesn't rush back into arms that once held her halfway. She doesn't confuse attention with devotion. She no longer builds temples on unstable ground. She's done with half-loves and almosts. She's done with being understood only in peace. If you want her now, you must meet her in her entirety. And that means meeting yourself first, because she will no longer translate her depth for shallow minds. She will no longer water down her truth to be digestible. She will no longer dim her light to keep Simeon comfortable in their darkness. No, she is the woman who has tasted silence and now hungers only for what teaches with eternity. So yes, he starts thinking about everything, every moment he didn't listen, every time he chose convenience over connection, every time he ignored head-up because he was afraid of drowning, and now he sits not in guilt but in reckoning because he knows she did not leave him. She returned to herself, and that return was not rejection. It was, and if he is to ever know her again, he must know himself first. There is a kind of woman who terrifies the world, not because she is loud, but because she is no longer looking to be. She listens to herself. She obeys her inner wisdom, and she lets go of everything that once anchored her to fear. That woman is no longer seeking security in someone else's arms. She has found it within the soft breath of her solitude, within the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat, within the gentle silence of nights she now spends with herself, not in waiting, but in witnessing. She does not crave chaos. She does not ache to be touched, just to feel alive. She has found life fine her stillness. She has found divinity in her distance. She is not ice. She is a fire that refuses to burn for anything gunworthy. The more she abstains from yearningless contact, the more she remembers whom she is. Every day she is without distress. She becomes more Dangarusto, the system that once relied on her confusion. She no longer plays the role assigned to her, the seductress, the fixer, the pleaser. She now plays only one role, the truth. And truth is never convenient. It shatters illusions. It unmasks fake. It demands honesty. Ange has become fluent in it. There is power in her touch, but even more in her refusal to touch. The restraint she practices is not from scarcity. It is from abundance. She knows what her energy does, and she no longer gives it away to Thassahu cannot honor it. Abstinence for Herries, not a cage. It is a clearing, a widdy open field where her soul can stretch, where her mind can rest, where her emotions are not filtered through someone else's lens. She is no longer decoding mixed signals. She is listening gamely to what is clear. And in that clarity, she begins to receive visions, dreams more vivid, intuitions sharper, truths louder. Her body, no longer renting old with others, becomes a vessel of revelation. She feels things others. She knows things she can. This is the return to her wildness, not the chaos of pain, but the wisdom of instinct. Carl Jung spoke of autonomy, the feminine soul within the collective unconscious. This woman, in her silence, reunites with that ancient force. She becomes a bridge between the visible and the hidden, between what is said and what is meant, between what is desired and what is sacred. He watches her from afar, not with eyes alone, but with the ache of knowing he never really saw her before. He sees her walking calm, radiant, untethered, and wonders how she became so full without anyone to fill her. He wonders how she glossed without anyone igniting her. But what he doesn't realize is that her fire was never out. It was just burning in Placiche refused to look, and now that it traces, he is blinded by its brilliance. She has no resentment toward him, no bitterness, only space. She needed that space to return to herself, to remember that love was never supposed to hurt. It was supposed to hold, to honor, to heal, and in the sacred act of abstaining, she did not numb the wound. She sat with it. She named it. She listened to what it taught her, and she stitched hers back together, not with thread, but with truth. Now she carries scars like sacred ink, each mark a memory, each memory a lesson, each lesson a vow never to abandon herself again. Her abstinence is not a protest. It is a promise, a promise to only offer herself where she is met fully, a promise to no longer abandon herself for flitting connection, a promise to trust Thessalence when it arrives and to honor Thespis it brings, because she knows now. The soul does not scream. It whispers, and only in silence can it be heard. He starts to wonder what would have happened if he had seen her, if he had held her without needing her to shrink, if he had listened without waiting to speak, if he had loved her not as possession but as presence. But she no longer lives in she lives in the now, and the now does not include what is uncertain. It includes only what is aligned. She is not waiting for Somione to meet her where she's gone. She is simply walking forward. And if Somione rises to walk beside her, it will not be because she slowed down. It will be because they sped up. She no longer makes excuses for why someone isn't ready. She no longer holds space for potential. She no longer delays her truth to protect someone else's comfort. And this is the power of Femilibus. It is not denial. It is discernment. It is not suppression. It is sovereignty. It is not emptiness. It is embodiment. She is not the absence of. She is the embodiment of it. Unconditional, unapologetic, uncompromising. And now every step she takes is sacred. Not because the world changed, but because she did. Now she walks, not in rebellion, but in she no longer needs to raise her voice to be heard. Her energy speaks louder than any words. Her silence is not absence, it's resonance. And those who attend to depth, they feel her even from a distance. She is no longer part of the noise. She has become the pause between notes, the stillness between storms, the calm that precedes clarity. Because while the world rushes to fill every void, She has learned to sit in hers, to listen, to wait, to allow. And in that space, she doesn't lose herself. She meets herself again and again more deeply each time. No mask, no makeup, no mirroring anyone else's expectations, just truth, raw, wild, free. This is their quiet. Power men often don't understand tontal. It's gone. It's the kind of power that doesn't compete or chase. It doesn't ask to be loved. It commands respect through presence alone. Her remembers how she used to reach for his hand, how her fingertips felt like home, how her affection was effortless, unguarded. But he never realized how sacred it was until it was no longer off. Now, every echo of her is Alison, a lesson in what he dismissed, Alison in what he avoided, a lesson in how his silence didn't come from strength, but from avoidance, and hers didn't come from weakness, but from awake. The woman who chooses abstinence isn't cold. She's clean, she's cleared. She's emptied herself of anything untrue. And what remains is essence, pure, undiluted, unshakable. There are nights when she cries, not out of regret, but release. Tears that are not of pain, but of finally letting go of the girl who begged, letting go of the woman who performed, letting go of every identity that kept her small. She does not hate him. She thanks him because it was through his absence that she finally had to be present with herself. His silence gave her the gift of her own voice. His distance gave her the gift of depth. And in that depth, she found her mission to protect her energy, to honor her rhythm, to never again betray her soul for the comfort of a body. She now understands shit most fear to learn, that love is not something you find in another. It is a me thing you awaken within. And on say I've tasted that kind of love, no counterfeit will ever satisfy again. She does not date out of loneliness. Shadow scent touch out of hunger. She does not open her body out of habit. She does it all from choice, deliberate, intentional, sacred, because her body is no longer a battleground. It is and temples do not open to tourists. They open only to those who come to worship, not to wander. She will not be entered by those who cannot enter themselves. She will not be claimed by those who cannot claim their own truth. She will not be softened by those who mistake desire for devotion. She is bind that now, and in this sacred abstinence, she becomes the embodiment of mystery, of magnetism, of power without force. Not everyone will understand her. Not everyone will stay, but those who do, they will never again look at love the same. Because this woman does not come to complete you. She comes to mirror you, to show you where you've abandoned your own soul. Toaken, the parts you forgot. Tokalenge, the parts you hide. And to invite you to rise beside her, not to hold her down, but to hold her sacred. He thinks of her now, not with possession, but with reverence. He understands that what he lost was not just a woman, but an opportunity, an invitation to evolve. And now that she has evolved without him, he sees her not with longing, but with humility. Because he knows to be close to her now would require the same courage she showed when she walked away. She does not return to what wounded her. She blesses it, learns from it, and keeps walking. And as she walks, she leaves behind not just people, but patterns. She is breaking cycles, not out of rage, but out of realization. This is not a punishment, it is a path. The path of the woman who chooses herself every morning, every night, every breath, and in doing so, she becomes untouchable. Not because she cannot be reached, but because she can no longer be manipulated. not because she's hardened, but because now her silence is sacred. Her talk is earned. Her love is not a game, it is a gateway. To know her is to face, to touch her is to feel through it of truth. To love her is to rise with her, or be left behind. Because when the body goes silent, the soul speaks, and what it says cannot be unheard. She's not waiting. She is not chasing. She's becoming. And if you are lucky, in order to witness that becoming, do not ask for her attention. Ask if your presence is worthy of standing beside her power. This is the silent power of femilibstance music.